Guardia Civil!
Before sunrise, a phalanx of Spanish National Police storms a Madrid apartment block. Boots thunder up concrete stairs. A door crashes open. Inside, startled young men freeze as red laser sights dance across their chests. In minutes, 11 suspects are in cuffs. It's the takedown of a gang with an oddly disarming name, Dominicans Don't Play. A name that belies a trail of blood and fear. They certainly weren't playing on the cold night that led to this raid. But what chain of violence brought an American-born gang to reign over Spain's streets? And what secret was nearly lost in the chaos? The answers begin in a turf war that turned a city into a battleground, and end with a twist that nobody saw coming. But first, flash back to where it all began. How did we get here? New York City, early 1990s, Washington Heights. A crew of Dominican-American teens form a street gang and dub it Dominicans Don't Play. It's a bold, almost cocky moniker. By the late 90s and 2000s, as waves of Latin American migrants arrived in Spain, the gang's influence jumped across the Atlantic. Madrid's working-class barrios soon saw the graffiti tags and colors of DDP alongside other bandas latinas. In fact, the group's founders had splintered off from older gangs like the Latin Kings and Yetas over national pride. Dominicans wanted their own brotherhood. They brought with them a fierce code and a taste for ferocity that Madrid had rarely seen. Police noted DDP's presence by 2006, already the largest Latin gang in Spain, and those numbers exploded in the years that followed as recruitment took hold in immigrant neighborhoods. These recruits sported baggy streetwear and colorful rosary beads, flashing complex hand signs in alleyways. They pledged loyalty to a new familiar on foreign soil, one that promised identity and protection but demanded total obedience in return. Almost immediately, the gang's brutal reputation grew. Dominicans Don't Play became infamous for their weapon of choice. The machete, a blade nearly as tall as a teenage boy, terrifyingly easy to buy at any hardware market. Youths prowled city parks with these knives strapped inside pant legs, and after each gang clash, police would recover piles of sharpened steel slick with blood. As one officer later testified, DDP quickly proved the most dangerous gang in recent times, arming young members with illegal weapons used to injure, rob, and carry out sexual attacks. In public, they formed prayer circle poses for group photos, fingers contorted into gang signs around their red and black bandanas. In private, they enforced a savage discipline. Whispers spread of recruits beaten unconscious for minor disloyalty, even female members allegedly punished with gang rape for trying to leave. This wasn't just teenage posturing, it was organized terror. By the mid-2000s, 5 murders in Madrid had already been blamed on Latin gang violence. Dominicans Don't Play, with their "Don't Mess With Us" ethos, were at the forefront of the new wave of street carnage. The warning signs were flashing, and Spanish authorities knew it. But the storm was only beginning, and soon it would overflow. In November 2009, a major police sweep tried to decapitate the DDP beast. Officers rounded up 40 members in one strike. The haul spoke volumes. 5 firearms, a grenade, machetes, bats, stacks of cash, and cocaine. The gang's local capitulos, or chapters, had clearly evolved from ragtag crews into tightly armed units dabbling in drug trafficking and more. Yet even massive crackdowns did not stop the violence. By 2014, Dominican Don't Play's notoriety led to an unprecedented legal blow. Spain's Supreme Court formally outlawed the gang nationwide. DDP joined the likes of Blood and Honor neo-Nazis on the list of banned criminal organizations. Police described DDP as the most dangerous street gang in Spain, whose members rarely went out unarmed. The court noted the gang had surfaced around 2004 and formed its own identity after splitting from other Latin gangs. For Spain's law enforcement, it was a clear message: zero tolerance. And yet, a court order could not erase what was already woven into the fabric of certain barrios. Beneath the ban, DDP simply slipped further underground, like a virus going dormant, only to erupt more violently. The streets would soon bleed again. Nightfall, Madrid, years later, 2 rival gangs spot each other near a 24-hour McDonald's by Atocha station. It's the first weekend of February, a chilly Saturday of 2022. Within moments, insults fly and 8 youths rush a 15-year-old boy outside the neon-lit restaurant. In the blur of fists and blades, one attacker drives a knife deep into the teenager's chest, piercing his heart. The boy, Spanish-born but of Latin roots, collapses on the sidewalk as crowds scatter in panic. Across town 1 hour earlier, another vicious ambush had played out in a dark park in Usera, a southern district. There, a 25-year-old man lay dying from multiple machete blows to his back. In one horrific night, 2 young lives were snuffed out in separate gang clashes barely 60 minutes apart. Madrid's emergency services radio buzzed with confusion. Was this coordinated warfare? Fue una noche de machetes, sangre y llanto. One report grimly noted, it was a night of machetes, blood and tears. In addition to the 2 fatalities, at least 3 more people were gravely wounded in related brawls before dawn. The attackers melted away into the urban night, but everyone knew what they represented. The signature weapons, the brutality, the fact these brawls erupted nearly simultaneously, all of it pointed to the ongoing feud between the Dominicans Don't and their equally ferocious rivals, the Trinitarios. The city hadn't seen a night of gang violence this lethal in years. And it wouldn't be the last. The DDP Trinitarios rivalry had become a cycle of vengeance, spinning faster and bloodier. Dominicans Don't and Trinitarios were once allies back in New York, but in Spain they evolved into mortal enemies, each determined to rule the Latin underground. By 2022, police openly labeled them the 2 most active gangs in Madrid. Territorial skirmishes erupted over a glance, a crossed path, a claim to a street corner. Reyertas, spontaneous street fights, could explode anywhere from subway stations to shopping malls if rival members crossed paths. Often there was no deeper motive than recognizing the other as one of them. In one incident that September, rival gangsters collided by chance at a shopping center, sparking a rolling brawl through the food court. Such encounters were practically seek and destroy missions. In gang slang, they call it la caída, the hunt. A crew goes out hunting for enemies to ambush. That was exactly what happened to 25-year-old Diego, one of the victims of the February 2022 bloodbath. The investigation later revealed that a pack of DDP members had roamed Usera that night, de cacería, on the prowl, when they recognized Diego as a Trinitario. Like a pack of wolves, at least 10 attackers swarmed him, knives flashing. Diego never stood a chance. Scenes like this left entire neighborhoods in fear. In the aftermath, makeshift shrines of candles and graffiti memorials appeared on street corners, RIP tags in looping letters for the fallen. Each murder only fueled the thirst for payback, and payback came again and again. Spring 2022, a few months after that deadly weekend, revenge was in the air. In the suburb of Villaverde, broad daylight, an 18-year-old DDP member named Alejandro walks near some railroad tracks. He doesn't know it, but Trinitarios have marked him. They ambush him at lunch hour, a crew of teens armed with blades and fury. Witnesses later recount how the assailants, boys as young as 14, stabbed and beat Alejandro repeatedly, leaving him lifeless in the dirt. Investigators suspected this was retaliation for the 15-year-old killed at Atocha, the Trinitarios' fallen brother. The cycle was complete. Blood for blood. 7 minors from the Trinitarios were arrested, some caught still wearing green bandanas and hiding machetes under their beds. A senior police official expressed alarm, not only for the brazenness of the murder, an execution at high noon next to a busy supermarket, but at the youth of those involved. Many hadn't even turned 18, yet were already scarred by violence and hardened by gang life. It was clear by now, Madrid was in the grip of a youth gang war, a tit-for-tat conflict with no end in sight. Police formed special task forces and flooded trouble hotspots with patrols, checking IDs of teens out late, confiscating weapons tucked in waistbands. Hundreds of arrests were made under a new anti-gang initiative. But for all the sweeps and seizures, the heart of the beast, the inner circle of gang leaders and their most devoted soldiers, remained at large, orchestrating chaos. The question loomed: what would it take to truly break the cycle? By late 2024, authorities got a partial answer, in the form of an all-out vendetta in Carabanchel. one of Madrid's southern districts. There, the Dominicans Don't Play ran a chapter known as the Four Coros, infamous for its aggression. This crew had been hit hard by rival attacks, 3 violent incursions by Trinitarios in their territory, according to later intelligence. The third strike came on a September night. Around 11 p.m., residents of Carabanchel's Carpetana area heard what sounded like firecrackers, then screams. In the street, 4 young men lay bleeding from gunshot wounds and another with a machete slash, all around 20 years old. They were DDP affiliates, victims of a surprise drive-by hit by Trinitarios. 2 attackers were caught fleeing in a rideshare vehicle, one just 17, another 22, both Honduran and allegedly Trinitario foot soldiers. Miraculously, none of the 5 victims died that night, but it was a close call. The Four Coros chapter of DDP was humiliated and enraged, 5 of their own shot up on their home turf. A chilling sense of inevitability hung in the air, everyone braced for the retaliation that was sure to come. But that wasn't the end of it. Retaliation came on January 14, 2025, and it came in the dark. Nearly 11:30 p.m., a black van creeps through the Usera district. Inside are members of DDP's Four Coros crew, armed and out for blood. They're cruising a neighborhood known as Trinitario territory, looking for any rival to target. Up ahead, a lone 20-year-old man walks along Tomeloso Street, maybe coming home from work. The van's headlights bathe him in light. It screeches to a halt. 4, 5, 6 figures jump out and surround the young man. He freezes. These strangers are barking orders. In a bizarre twist, they force him to kneel and flash a Trinitarios gang hand sign, a cruel humiliation meant to insult their enemies. The victim, shaking and completely confused, complies. He's not in either gang, but he's at their mercy. Suddenly, bang, a gunshot at point-blank range. The young man crumples, a bullet lodged in his spine. Before he can even breathe, the attackers hack at him with a machete, slashing his head and arms repeatedly. The assailants then vanish into the winter night, leaving their innocent prey sprawled on the cold pavement. Neighbors who hear the commotion rush out to find a horror. The 20-year-old writhing, blood pooling, his spine irreparably damaged. Paramedics stabilize him, barely, and race to hospital. Against the odds, he survives, but he will never walk again. It was a brutal case of mistaken identity. The young man had no gang affiliation at all. He was attacked simply for being in enemy territory. This senseless act proved even to hardened detectives how wildly out of control the feud had become. Yet ironically, it was also the mistake that would finally help bring down the Four Coros cell. The police now had what they needed, a high-profile crime with enough clues to launch an extensive probe. The hunt for the perpetrators began that very night. For months, an elite police task force pursued the case. Surveillance units tailed suspected DDP members through the maze-like streets of Carabanchel. Wiretaps picked up anxious calls between gang lieutenants. Piece by piece, investigators mapped out the Four Coros hierarchy and the role each member played in the January ambush. In secret dawn raids, they quietly picked up lower-level players, flipping a few into informants. By summer 2025, the trap was ready. In the early hours of July 8th and 9th, Madrid police simultaneously raided 9 locations linked to DDP. They seized an arsenal of gang hardware, machetes and knives, imitation firearms that looked real, including a Mac-10 submachine gun replica and a revolver, plus ammunition, phones, laptops, and stacks of DDP manifestos and symbols. Parked outside one safe house, they even found the very getaway van used in the January attack. When the dust settled, 11 members of Dominicans Don't Play's Four Coros faction were under arrest, 10 in Madrid and 1 who had fled to Leon. Among them were the suspected triggerman and machete wielder from the Usera shooting. At a press conference that week, Spain's Interior Ministry hailed the operation as a major victory. The Four Coros crew, one of the most active and violent cells of DDP, was considered dismantled. Officials noted that this crew alone had been behind a string of violent crimes, and their takedown likely prevented imminent murders. For the first time in a long time, residents of Carabanchel could sleep a little easier, knowing the chief architects of chaos in their neighborhood were in custody. The arrests were a turning point. After 2 decades of mayhem, Spanish authorities had struck a serious blow against Dominicans Don't Play on their soil. 11 accused gangsters, all between their late teens and late 20s, now faced charges ranging from attempted murder to illegal weapons possession and criminal association. Judges wasted no time. 10 of the 11 were ordered held without bail, pending trial. As police led the cuffed young men out, cameras captured a telling image. Some suspects flashed defiant hand gestures, those DDP gang signs, even as they were shoved into patrol cars. It was a silent oath that the gang code lived on despite the crackdown. But behind the bravado, there was a sense that an era might be waning. The government vowed to keep remaining members under close watch. Community leaders, exhausted by the violence, organized neighborhood meetings to reclaim the streets for youth who had not yet been lost. And yet, even in triumph, there is tragedy. This story carries a final twist, one that reminds us how deep the scars of gang warfare run, and how the pain often radiates beyond the gangs themselves. Rewind briefly to July 2021, a summer night in Madrid's Retiro district. An 18-year-old emerging rapper, Isaac Lopez, known by the stage name Little Kinky, strolls through a dim pedestrian tunnel on his way to meet a friend and film a music video. Isaac is not a Trinitario. He's not DDP either, though they've tried to recruit him. In fact, he has repeatedly refused to join the Dominicans Don't Play over the past several months. Isaac has his music, his family, and despite mild autism, Asperger's syndrome that made him a bit of a loner, he's got dreams outside the gang life. But to the local DDP crew, Isaac's refusals are an insult, and worse, they've convinced themselves wrongly that he's sided with the Trinitarios. So on that July night, 4 DDP affiliates, 1 adult and 3 minors, stalk Isaac into the tunnel on electric scooters. It's eerily quiet. Isaac is on the phone with a friend, unaware he's being hunted. Suddenly, the attackers pounce. They stab him once, twice, 4 times in the back. The blade punctures his lung and heart. Mortally wounded, Isaac collapses beside the curb, his phone still connected, as the perpetrators flee into the darkness on their scooters. He dies there, alone under the concrete archway. The killing of Little Kinky sends shockwaves through Madrid. This wasn't a rival gang member. This was a vulnerable teenager, a beloved only son with a disability, murdered for nothing. A police manhunt swiftly followed. By November 2021, detectives pieced together the clues and arrested the 4 suspects. In their report, they laid out the motive baldly. Isaac was targeted for his continual refusal to join DDP and because the gang mistakenly believed he was a Trinitario. The truth was almost too cruel to believe. Dominicans Don't Play had killed someone not because he was their enemy, but because he said no to becoming one of them. 2 years later, in October 2023, the verdict came. The adult ringleader, 20-year-old David B., was found guilty of Isaac's murder, stabbed a defenseless 18-year-old in the back, and sentenced to Spain's most severe punishment, prisión permanente revisable, a form of life imprisonment subject to review. It was only the second time a gang-related killer had received that ultimate sentence in Spain. The judge cited not only the cold-blooded nature of the crime, but Isaac's particular vulnerability, his autism, in handing down the ruling. As David stood in court to hear his fate, he reportedly tried to offer excuses, claiming through tears that drugs clouded his mind that night and that he'd ruined 2 families, Isaac's and his own. But the damage was done. In the courtroom benches, Isaac's mother clutched a photo of her son and wept. The open question hung heavy in the air. Why? Why did this vibrant young man have to die? What twisted code of honor drove a gang to prey on one of its own community's children? There were no good answers, only the cold comfort that justice at last was served. The tragedy of Little Kinky's murder casts a long shadow over the tale of Dominicans Don't Play in Spain. It reveals the painful truth that beyond the headlines of gang versus gang, the real toll is measured in innocent lives, shattered families, potential unrealized. It's the neighborhood kid paralyzed by a stray bullet. It's the grieving mother lighting a candle at a sidewalk memorial. It's the latent fear that once turned Madrid's parks into no-go zones after dusk. Yet, amid the heartache, there is a sliver of hope. police and community efforts have weakened DDP's grip. Many of its most violent members are now behind bars. Spain's Supreme Court long ago branded the gang a criminal organization and ordered its dissolution, a directive being enforced piece by piece. Youth outreach programs are trying to intercept at-risk teens before the gangs do, offering art, sports, a different family to belong to. Still, the embers of gang culture don't die easily. DDP chapters persist in the shadows, and other gangs wait in the wings. The legacy of Dominicans Don't Play leaves Spain with lessons written in blood, about immigration and integration, about young people falling through society's cracks, and about the primal appeal of brotherhood, however toxic, to those who feel powerless. The final scene closes on a Madrid street at twilight. The camera pans from a fading DDP tag scrawled on a wall to the silhouette of youths playing football in a courtyard, laughter echoing. Was this the end of Dominicans Don't Play's reign of terror, or just the closing of one violent chapter and the uncertain start of another? The answer, like the city's night, remains poised between hope and dread. A story still unfolding even as the sirens fade.